You were the calm one during family chaos. You learned to read the room before you could read books. You became the emotional translator, the peacekeeper, the one who just understood things earlier than you should have. People called you mature, responsible, wise beyond your years. But maturity wasn't a gift you were born with. It was a skill you had to learn to survive. Let me tell you something important. If you grew up too fast, you didn't choose that. You adapted. Your nervous system learned that safety meant being hyper-aware, hyper-responsible, hyper-attuned to everyone else's needs. And that made perfect sense in the environment you were in. You're not damaged. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. Because here's what most people don't understand about growing up too fast. It's not about taking on chores or being independent. It's about managing emotions that weren't yours to carry. When a parent is inconsistent, overwhelmed, or emotionally unavailable, someone has to hold the family's emotional stability. And often, that someone is a child who learns to read subtle shifts in mood, predict reactions, manage tension before it escalates. Psychologists call this parentification. You became the parent to your own parent, not because you wanted power, but because someone needed to create predictability in an unpredictable emotional landscape. You learned to comfort before you understood what comfort meant. You learned to problem solve before you had language for the problems. You learned to regulate other people's emotions before you knew how to regulate your own. And your nervous system encoded that as your job. This created something specific in your brain, a belief that if you just stayed alert enough, responsible enough, aware enough, you could prevent bad things from happening. Maybe if you were good, Mom wouldn't be sad. Maybe if you were quiet, Dad wouldn't get angry. Maybe if you took care of your siblings, the family wouldn't fall apart. You couldn't control the chaos, but you could control yourself. So you became extremely controlled, extremely responsible, extremely careful. And that felt like safety, because in unpredictable environments, self-control is the only control a child has. Children who grow up too fast often develop certain cognitive abilities earlier than their peers, not because they're smarter, but because their survival required it. You learn to think abstractly about emotions. You learn to anticipate consequences. You learn to see patterns in behavior that other kids weren't tracking yet. This is why teachers might have called you mature, why adults felt comfortable confiding in you, why you seemed older than you were. But that cognitive acceleration came at a cost. While other kids were learning through play, you were learning through responsibility. While they were developing identity, you were developing hypervigilance. But here's the part that nobody tells you about growing up too fast. That early maturity doesn't just go away when you become an adult. It becomes the foundation of how you move through the world. In adulthood, people who grew up too fast often look incredibly independent, self-sufficient, capable, like they have it all together. You don't ask for help easily. You handle things yourself. You're the friend people call in a crisis because you stay calm. You're the one who figures it out, who manages, who handles complexity without falling apart. And people admire that. They see strength. But what they don't see is that this independence wasn't built from confidence. It was built from necessity, from learning early that you couldn't rely on others to be emotionally consistent. So you learn to rely only on yourself. And that's exhausting, because true independence includes the ability to be dependent sometimes, to let your guard down, to trust that someone else can hold things when you can't. But your nervous system learned the opposite. It learned that letting go means loss of control, and loss of control feels dangerous. And this shows up differently as you age. In your 20s, that hyper-responsibility might look like ambition. You're the reliable one, the one who gets things done, the one who never drops the ball. But by your 30s, something starts to crack. You realize you're tired, not just physically tired, soul tired, from carrying weight that was never yours to begin with. You start to notice that you've been managing other people's emotions your entire life, that you've been the steady one, the grounded one, the one who holds space for everyone else's chaos while never having space held for yours. And you start to ask a question you never asked before. Who takes care of me? There's a specific kind of grief that comes with realizing you grew up too fast. It's not dramatic, it's quiet. It's the grief of what you didn't get to be. You didn't get to be careless. You didn't get to be irresponsible. You didn't get to make mistakes without feeling like the world would collapse. You didn't get to just be a kid. And even now, as an adult, play feels uncomfortable. Letting go feels unsafe. Being silly feels vulnerable. Because your nervous system never learned that those things were allowed. You learned that your value came from being useful, from being the one who could handle it, from never being a burden. And that belief doesn't just disappear because you're older now. Because here's what growing up too fast really does. It wires your nervous system to equate hypervigilance with safety. Being aware of everyone's emotional state, anticipating needs before they're spoken, managing tension before it becomes conflict. That's not just a habit, it's how your brain learned to regulate. Other people regulate through connection, through being held, through letting someone else take the lead. But you regulate through control, through staying one step ahead, through making sure nothing unexpected happens. And that works, until it doesn't. Until you realize that you can't relax because your nervous system doesn't know how to exist without a job to do. This also shows up differently as you age. In adult relationships can feel complicated for people who grew up too fast. You're often attracted to people who need you, not consciously, but your nervous system recognizes the dynamic. Someone needs managing, needs emotional regulation, needs taking care of. And you know how to do that. It feels familiar. Or you go the opposite direction. You choose partners who are stable and consistent, and then you feel restless, bored, like something's missing, because your nervous system is so used to chaos that peace feels like waiting for something bad to happen. Either way, you're reenacting the same pattern, trying to control the uncontrollable, trying to earn love through usefulness, trying to prove you're not a burden by never having needs. And the people who truly love you keep telling you you don't have to do that you can just exist, that you're enough without the performance. But your nervous system doesn't believe them because it learned early that love is conditional on being good, being helpful, being easy. So, if you're someone who grew up too fast, here's what I need you to know. You didn't miss out on childhood because you were defective. You adapted to an environment that required you to. And that adaptation kept you safe when you needed it most. But you're not in that environment anymore, and the survival skills that protected you then might be limiting you now. You don't have to be the responsible one all the time. You don't have to manage everyone's emotions. You don't have to prove your worth through usefulness. You're allowed to be cared for. You're allowed to not have it together. You're allowed to ask for help without feeling like a burden. And learning that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're finally letting yourself be human. Because growing up too fast wasn't your fault, but learning to slow down, to rest, and let someone else hold the weight sometimes, that's yours to claim. And there's nothing broken about wanting what you never got to have, the space to just be without the job of holding everything together. If this video just put words to something you've carried your whole life without knowing how to name it, stick around. This channel exists for people who grew up having to be more than they should have been and are finally learning they don't have to be anymore. Subscribe. You'll find a lot more of yourself here.